Welcome to this presentation on the concept of risk. This is a high-level overview. Risk is one of the fundamental concepts in the risk management framework. In RMF, risk management is applied to a system and security control management process. But there is a much wider definition and view of risk in many fields. This includes business risk, investment risk, security risk, and so on. Risk has a negative connotation, but without risk, there is no chance for growth or progress in organizations. The key is to manage risk effectively. If risk isn't managed properly, the entire company can fail. On the other hand, if risk is managed effectively, organizations can thrive. There are several concepts related to risk. We will discuss them now. Assets can be anything that is valuable to the organization. Assets can be hardware, software, for example, code, applications, etc. It can be data or information, organizational reputation, and more. How to value assets can be an entire class on its own. The value of hardware is easy as it's usually based on replacement cost, but key information is harder to determine. For example, after an organization has invested years of research on a new technology, if that technology is stolen, how many years of research, study, lost potential, future revenues adds up to the value of that new technology for the organization? Assets can be tangible or intangible. Tangible are those items that we can hold, express in replacement costs, etc. Intangible are things that are harder to measure, like company reputation or organizational investment in a research and development project. The second important term in risk management is threats. A threat is something that may or may not happen. It is a potential. Threats can be a thing, for example, denial of service attack, or an entity, for example, insider threat. Threats can be external or internal, natural or man-made, intentional or accidental. We'll discuss each type of threat. External threats are outside the boundary of the organization. They can also be thought of as risks that are outside the control of the organization. Internal threats are within the boundary of the organization. They could be related to employees or other personnel who have access to company resources. Internal threats can be related to any hardware or software controlled by the business. Natural or man-made. Natural threats are often related to weather, such as hurricanes, tornadoes, and ice storms. Earthquakes and tsunamis are also natural threats. A human or man-made threat is any threat from a person. Any attempt to sabotage resources is a man-made threat. Fire could be man-made or natural depending on how the fire started. Intentional or accidental. Any deliberate attempt to compromise confidentiality, integrity, or availability is intentional. Employee mistakes or user error are accidental threats. A faulty application that corrupts data could be considered accidental. Vulnerabilities are the third term in risk management. Vulnerabilities are weaknesses that could be exploited. The risk analysis process measures the criticality of the vulnerabilities. Controlling risk is our fourth item. Controlling risk refers to how we reduce or control risk. This can also be referred to as mitigating risk. RMF Step 3 and 4 focuses on identifying and implementing ways to control the risk to systems. Now that we've defined the key terms and concepts in risk management, we can define what risk is. Risk is the likelihood that a loss will occur. Losses occur when a threat exposes a vulnerability. Our security triad consists of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Those concepts are related to risk as well. On the previous slide, we discussed threats and how they're related to our CIA triad. On this slide, we provide some examples of each type of threat related to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. There are 4 ways to manage risk: avoidance, accepting risk, reducing risk, and transferring risk. Avoidance, this includes not performing an activity that could carry risk. An example would be not buying a property or business in order to not take on the legal liability that comes with it. Another would be not flying in order not to take the risk that the airplane were to be hijacked. Avoidance may seem the answer to all risks, but avoiding risk also means losing out on the potential gain that accepting the risk may have allowed. Now, accepting risk means that whatever action we are taking that is associated with the risk, that action is so important to our organization that it is worth suffering the effects, whatever risk could occur, without taking any actions to reduce the risk. Now, reducing risk is simply controlling it. This means putting measures in place to reduce the risk. For example, if your house only has the installed locks, but you feel the neighborhood has had some crime recently, you can reduce your risk of being robbed by installing a monitored alarm system. The key with reducing risk is to choose a control that does not cost more than the value of the asset you're protecting. Transferring risk just means giving it to someone else. For example, when you drive your car, you transfer the risk of getting into an accident and paying repair costs to your insurance company. Most cybersecurity professionals use the 4 avoid, accept, reduce, transfer ways to handle risk. But other sectors, such as the finance sector and investing, use a different set of options. Risk control techniques can be classified into one of the following 6 broad categories. Definitions of each are on the next slide. Avoidance, loss prevention, loss reduction, separation, duplication, diversification. Avoidance should be considered when the expected value of the losses from an activity outweighs the expected benefits of that activity. Loss prevention is a risk control technique that reduces the frequency of a particular loss. For instance, pressure relief valves on a boiler are intended to prevent explosions by keeping the pressure in the boiler from reaching an unsafe level. The valve is a type of loss prevention, not avoidance, because a boiler explosion is still possible, just not as likely. Loss reduction is designed to reduce the severity of the risk, reduce damage before and after. Examples of pre-loss activities would be the development of a disaster recovery plan, including training and periodic testing. Post-loss reduction activities could involve claims management, including prompt claims reporting and incident investigation. Separation, duplication. These risk control techniques are designed to reduce high loss severity exposures, not avoid, prevent, or reduce loss to any single asset or operation. Separation involves the isolation of an exposure from other exposures, perils, or hazards, such as when a business occupies several buildings at numerous locations rather than one large building. Duplication entails the utilization of backups or spares, such as when a business stores their backup data at a location separate from the main place of business. Diversification is a risk control technique that spreads loss exposures over a myriad of projects, products, areas, or markets. A cost-benefit analysis compares the business impact with the cost to implement a control. Some of the hidden costs to implementing a control may be cost to train employees, costs for ongoing maintenance, software and hardware renewal costs. The total cost of your control is based on the expected loss before you implemented the control minus the expected loss after you implement the control. Residual risk is the risk that remains after you apply controls. It's not feasible to eliminate all risks. Instead, you take steps to reduce the risk to an acceptable level. The risk that's left is residual risk. The risk assessment process, like the RMF process, is cyclical in nature. The full range of activities consist of assessing risk, conducting decision support, implementing controls, and measuring program effectiveness. You can see the relationship between the risk management process and RMF. Steps 1 through 3 in RMF coincide with assessing risk. Step 1 and 5 align with decisions. Step 4 is implementing controls. And step 6 in the RMF is continuous monitoring, which is related to measuring program effectiveness. If an organization does not manage risk or does not do so in an effective manner, there are consequences. This slide identifies low, medium, and high impacts if risk is not managed properly. Another way to look at managing risk is a balancing act. We cannot have so high a security posture that individuals cannot do their jobs. This would negatively impact the company's ability to continue to exist. We also cannot have so low a security posture that our organization is regularly targeted, as that also affects the future of the company. We have to find a way to balance risk management and security posture with the requirements of the organization to complete their mission. In order to implement risk effectively and demonstrate to management successes, we have to be able to measure our impact. Security measurement is defined by SANS as identifying the values of security-relevant factors. We can do this in two ways: objective, which consists of countable, quantifiable measurement, or subjective, which is more qualitative. Subjective measures are harder to put into numbers, for example, company reputation or security awareness of employees. The values used by management to make security comparisons are security metrics, and they tend to be quantitative in nature. It is imperative that in addition to managing risk properly, we add the ability to measure security value into our toolbox to be effective security officers. We will not be able to seek funding and support from the organization without being able to demonstrate the value we provide. Thank you for watching this presentation on the basic concept of risk. If you have any questions, please contact your instructor via email or the Ask Your Instructor forum on Blackboard.